Good morning, everyone. It's a really bright and sunny Thursday morning. Thank you all for joining us. We're still seeing a lot of participants come in, but I think it's a good time to start. We don't want to keep you waiting too long this morning. So welcome to Mediacorp Executive Insights. This is our 8th webinar. Just before we kick into the presentation proper, a little bit of housekeeping. The webinar is being recorded. At any point of time, you will be muted throughout the session. So if you feel that you need to chat, or if you have any questions across any of the topics that we're covering, please use the Q&A and chat functions in the Zoom options at the bottom of your screen. All right, let's kick this off. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us. It's a very interesting topic that we're going to cover today. Now, whether you are a marketer, an advertiser, somebody who's just started up your business, or you're a digital practitioner like I am, you would have heard some news about the cookieless world. You would have heard some news about cookies being removed from browsers. And this is going to impact all of us in some form or another, even the end user, right? So businesses who are involved in digital marketing need to think about how this is going to impact them. What's going to happen with cookies being removed? What is the cookieless world going to look like? We're going to try and cover some of these topics today. We're going to go through the basics of what kind of user data is being collected, what the cookies are used for, how some publishers like Mediacorp are making changes in what we do, how advertisers can take some learnings from the industry. What is the industry preparing so that when we enter a world of zero cookies, how can we continue to ensure that digital marketing is efficient and relevant to the end user? And this is important across every aspect of the value chain. We've got a really interesting panel with us today. Paul Shepherd joins us. He's the Chief Investment Officer and President of Platform from Omnicom Media Group. He's going to give us a really interesting view of how the agencies have taken a step forward, how Omnicom Media Group has taken a step forward to address this change. His experience across the advertisers and also as a business owner himself. Myself, I am Sandeep. I am a Senior Account Director at Mediacorp in the Digital Media Solutions team. And I usually spend my time working with clients to help meet their marketing goals. And I also lead the data partnership discussions at Mediacorp. And last but not least is Himanshu. Himanshu is the lead of digital analytics at Mediacorp. We've got a really interesting team that we call CIA. Consumer Insights and Analytics. Himanshu comes from that team, and they are basically the engine behind all of our data efforts. All right, and he's going to talk about Mediacorp-specific efforts, right? So just before I go in, guys, anything you want to say?
Firstly, thank you for the opportunity of speaking today, and welcome to everybody. Good morning, everybody. It's a very interesting topic. It's a very important topic, and I think thank you for Mediacorp taking the thought leadership to kind of put this on. I think this will be the first of many conversations that we're going to have, so thank you.
Same here. Good morning to everyone. Welcome to the webinar, and thanks again for joining. Hope you guys will get to get some good updates on what's happening post the cookie phasing out by Google, Apple, and all the other browsers.
Thank you, guys. So we're going to address the cookieless world, and we're going to just talk about a few of the changes. Now, some portions of this conversation may be a slightly bit technical. Don't worry if you're struggling to catch up. Just post us a couple of questions. At the end of the session, we will be sending out the slides, right? So you can reference that. There will be quite a bit of content that you can look up afterwards. Some of you who are cookie practitioners and data practitioners already, guide us along, right, with any comments that you have. All right, so let's get started. I want to get a good feel for exactly, where you are in your data journey. So we're going to conduct this poll. It would have just popped up in front of you. What sort of audience data are you accessing at the moment, right? And this is in specific relation to digital marketing, right? And whether that digital marketing is through your email blasts, programmatic marketing, or any other form of marketing that you're running right now in the digital space. So take a minute to please answer these questions. First option is first-party data via a data management platform, third-party cookie data from an external provider, publisher-owned audience data, whether you're working with Mediacorp, SPH, or any one of the other publishers, in-house CRM data that you collect from your customers, And if you don't know what I'm talking about, then please choose the fifth option. All right, click away. We're gonna show our poll results to get a better gauge of who we're talking to. Right, just trying to get the results up. There we go. Right, so we've got a really good mix. That's nice. I have 9% of people who said, what are you talking about? Which is perfect, which either means I'm going to bore you to death with the basics, or you're really going to benefit from this session. First party data, about 42% of y'all, 51% relying on third party cookie data. That is really interesting because that's exactly what we're going to talk about. So pay attention to how the removal of the third party cookie could impact us, and also what are the steps we can take to address this. All right, 48% using publisher owned data, great, and in-house CRM 40% as well. Perfect. Now, let's get into it. I mean, I think what's really important is to just do a very quick recap on what exactly is digital audience data. Now, most of you are very familiar with audience data already, so I'm just going to cover this really quickly. Audience data covers all sorts of things, and demographic is the first port of call for almost any digital marketing campaign that you run. Understanding the age data, age, gender, income, where they come from, what they're doing, what's their profile in terms of a spend is very important, and that's how you build your marketing strategy. Interests, usually based on your content consumption, and that's a space where Mediacorp spends a lot of its effort understanding exactly what content our users are consuming. Intent, based on your behavior, how you're interacting with the content that you see, how you're interacting with the ads that you're served. When you visit a site that has a promo, are you actually accessing the promo? Geography, where are you coming from? In larger markets, the state that you're accessing the content or the ad from is really, really important information. But for us in Singapore, what's the most important is what sort of device are you using? Which browser are you using? What are the settings on your browser that we can access? Search and social engagement, a lot of data points that can be pulled from your Google Analytics data, where the traffic is coming from, what users are searching for, what are they responding to on social media, and obviously your CRM data. Now, CRM data is data that you collect from your own users, right? What they tell you, and that's a declared first-party important data. Now, this data, a lot of it is not addressed through cookies. Only maybe some of the portions on the left, demographic, intent, interest, and geography, device and browser can be addressed using the cookie. And then we talk a little bit about first-party data as well. So what is first-party data? It is data that you own. It is your own data. And it is always said that first-party data is the most accurate data because this is what your users have told you. This is what you're seeing of your users' behavior on your own platforms. Second-party data is usually someone else's first-party data. So a perfect example is if you're an advertiser who's collecting first-party data and you partner with someone like Mediacorp for their first-party data, Mediacorp's data becomes your second-party data. Yeah. And lastly, the focus of today's conversation is third-party data. And third-party data is usually aggregated across multiple different sources. So third-party usage is segregated and aggregated by tech vendors who collect and bucket this data for the purpose of your digital marketing activities. Okay. Now, when we talk about cookies, I mean, I love chocolate chip. I had to put this image up there. I love all cookies, walnuts, you name it. But that's not the cookie we're talking about today. The cookie that we are talking about today is meant to collect data about users, especially on the browser. And how exactly does a third-party cookie work? Very quickly, what is it? It is a small text file that stores user data, various of the data points that we talked about in the earlier slide. It usually stays on your browser. So regardless of the browser you're using, you would have had some interface with a cookie. It's usually when you first visit a domain and the cookie stays with you until you clear it. If you don't clear it, then the cookie usually lasts for 540 days. But in often daily use cases, we tend to look at cookies for a lifespan of about 90 days maximum. And third-party usage is basically in the space of ad targeting, and deriving analytics in terms of what users are actually doing. Now, here we want to talk a little bit about how digital user data has evolved over time, right? So, with the growth of the .com era, the cookie was introduced in the late 90s, and this was primarily used for personalized, advertising. E-commerce was still growing very, very slowly, more so in the US than in our region, and ads were primarily focused around email search and contextual-based ads. Back in those days, I remember when an advertiser would go out, and if he's a car advertiser, then he only wants to advertise on a car website. Towards the mid-2000s, internet speed increased a lot, right? Tremendous increase in internet speed. A lot more data was able to be collected. There was an explosion of user-generated content. Personalized ads were in the focus, and a lot of third-party ad platforms started to emerge. And third-party cookies started to underpin the ad model, right? In 2010 onwards, what we saw was smartphone usage growth. Data became a lot more personal, and the cookie almost evolved in that sense. The question was raised about, okay, if I'm on a mobile app, then the cookie doesn't exist there. How am I collecting data? So that's where device ID started to become a really important data point. Right, marketing automation started to grow. We started to get a lot more granular in terms of our user data, and programmatic ads really took off. Right, so the programmatic ecosystem, I think in Singapore, this was the period where a lot of global programmatic companies were setting up their Asia hub in Singapore. Audience buying and retargeting, right, led to exchange of cookies across multiple platforms. So demand-side platforms, supply-side platforms, and data management platforms were all exchanging cookies. And then we're in the space right now where two very important conversations are being had. Number one is about user privacy. Number two is about the removal of cookies from your browsers. Okay, and we're going to address that today. I think the user privacy debate has had multiple conversations around it, and you just have to do a quick search, on terms like GDPR and PDPC to get a bit of background in this. But I think the monumental events that occurred around the Cambridge Analytica saga, we all remember when Mark Zuckerberg was called in front of the FTC in the US to really, address the privacy violations and concerns that were brought up with that whole Cambridge Analytica saga. And more news started coming out where, people who were very close to that saga were pushing out information. And I think that was a period where even if you weren't involved in the data space or the digital marketing space, you were made aware that there is a debate going on about user privacy. Okay, and this was very, very recent. The conversation is still ongoing. Some of these articles were published as early as earlier this year. Then changes started being implemented, right? So we've seen changes across browsers where browsers have taken, these tech companies that we interface with on a daily basis have taken the step to go ahead and say, we need to change how we're collecting data. We need to change how the cookie is being managed. And we need to change a focus towards the user. So Firefox started this, in mid-2019, where they started blocking cookies and third-party tracking by default. So if you're using a Firefox browser, cookies are disabled unless you allow it. Google Chrome announced that, they will be blocking all third-party cookies by 2022. And Google Chrome has the biggest impact because I think from a market coverage perspective, Google Chrome carries the most usage, right, in terms of browsers. Apple did share some news as well, but earlier this year, they released an update on Safari to say that they're going to follow what Firefox is doing and also block third-party cookies by default. So these are the changes that we're seeing. It means that for us as practitioners, the collection and usage of third-party cookies really is completely going to change. That environment's completely going to change. So what exactly is the impact, right? I'm going to ask Himanshu to talk about the impact of this, in the programmatic space, right? So Himanshu, over to you.
Yeah. So if you look at the biggest impact of what Sandeep spoke about just now. It's going to be on the programmatic advertising value chain because it's predicated primarily on the third-party cookie. So this includes, all user retargeting campaigns which are run to convert or upsell audiences. So if you're an e-commerce site, who's trying to convert audiences who visited a product page but did not either add to cart or check out, those campaigns are going to be impacted. Audience buying. So if you're targeting audiences, specific segments like travel enthusiasts or sports fanatics or users interested in fashion, that's going to have an impact as well. And if you use data management platforms for audience management, particularly buying third-party data, that's going to see an impact. And finally, on the publisher side, if if you're selling your inventory through programmatic, which could be direct, guaranteed, or auction or open auction, that's going to see an impact as well. Sandeep, if you go to the next slide. And what's however not going to be impacted is impact on collecting first-party data and its activation. So both on the advertiser and the publisher side. So advertisers can continue collecting customer data via their CRM tools. So it could be email IDs, phone numbers, social media data like Twitter handles and so on. Publishers can also continue collecting user data via either subscriptions or user logins or user signups, or even behavior data through first-party cookies that are dropped by their analytics tools. And then advertisers and publishers will still be able to match their respective first-party data for activating campaigns. So this may be through direct match or through lookalike matching between the two sides. And finally, contextual targeting will, of course, continue in the future as well. Sandeep, if you go to the next slide. Yeah, so what's going to happen is, since first-party data is going to continue, the focus is going to shift to first-party data and leveraging it as an alternative to third-party cookie-based advertising. First-party data, both login-based or even cookie-based, is a more detailed, accurate, and trusted form of data because it usually comes with user consent. However, there can be a challenge with its scale because signups are not as easy to get as cookies, and its interoperability as well. So while most organizations collect first-party data, it may need to be scaled up, organized, and we need better integration for actionability. So let's hear more from Paul on how the different stakeholders in the advertising world are impacted and how can they navigate this challenge. So over to you, Paul.
Awesome, thank you. Over the next couple of slides, I'm going to cover a couple of things. So the first thing I'm going to cover is what does this mean for advertisers? And then from an Omnicom Media Group point of view, how we're navigating it. I think the first thing we need to do is understand changes here. This is going to affect the way that we operate. But one of the things that I think we really need to start looking at is this the opportunity or the change that we needed? I think we heard earlier in the presentation that cookies was a piece of technology that came in the early 90s or mid 90s. It wasn't designed to underpin the ecosystem that we've asked cookies to do today. So what we need to look at is over the next 18 months or so, what is the technology that's going to take us forward 5 and 10 years out? So I see this as a big opportunity for us to kind of just change the conversation and build upon that. I think one of the things that we're speaking to a lot of our advertisers about now is the value exchange. For us to live a first-party world, we need to add value to the supply chain. And that's just as important for an advertiser compared to a publisher and the technology. We as advertisers have a custodian responsibility to do the right thing with our clients' data. So by increasing the value exchange, increasing value to that, many clients that we have will see benefit out of the first-party world. We are moving to a first-party world. That's actually a good thing. But bring it back to what we do. Omnicom Media Group, we have amazing agencies in O&D, PhD, Hearts and Science. We have the pleasure of working with many, many, many clients. There's kind of 3 or 4 core areas that we focus on: planning and strategy, buying and targeting, and measurement. This is fundamentally going to change the way that we approach behavioral targeting. Again, when we look at that, sometimes change is scary. That's actually a very good opportunity. So no longer will my teams have the opportunity to log into a platform, we just talked about the programmatic ecosystem, and see millions of permutations. What we need to do now is we need to understand the power of first party and how do we drive that through. The big thing that we're talking to clients about right now is success metrics, measurement framework, and how we measure today will have to evolve. How do we utilize data right now to inform what we'll do in the future? So that's why you'll hear a lot of us at Omnicom talking about the shift away from sharing data to sharing insights. I actually think for advertisers, this is really in their swim lane. If you actually have a look at where we were 10, 15 years ago before this amazing thing called programmatic came along and behavioral targeting, what we had groups inside clients who would actually go out and understand cohorts and groups from a research point of view. And I actually think that's an opportunity for us to get back to some of that, because I think just letting the system tell us who our clients are is not always the best way. And from a very tactical point of view, I think it's important to call out that we will see more walled gardens. And for some people, this is a negative or a positive. Again, I see it more the opportunity. Traditionally, when we talk about walled gardens, we usually talk about the likes of Google, Facebook, Amazon, Verizon. What we'll see, because of the responsibility of publishers in the world of first party, that they will have to protect that data because that's their responsibility. So we will see a lot more publishers who have that unique opportunity create walls around their data for privacy reasons. So there's a few things that we're seeing from an advertiser point of view and some of the conversations that were happening. I think the thing that I'd like to call out is we're 18 months out. It's now time for us to get ready. Let's learn from what we saw with things like GDPR and what we saw in California, and let's get ahead. So we've moved forward to the next slide. What we're doing from an Omnicom Media Group point of view is, in some ways, we've got the jump. We invested heavily 10+ years ago into an organization called Analect inside Omnicom Media Group, founded by Scott Hagedorn, who is now the Chief Investment CEO of Omnicom Media Group in North America, and Jonathan Nelson, who's the CEO of Digital for Omnicom. And their vision was very, very simple. How do we unlock insights? How do we unlock capabilities for our clients and advantages for our clients? And we went very early into the idea of the persistent ID. Globally, we launched a capability, just go back one slide, capability around the persistent ID underpinned by Newstar. And the goal of that capability was understand what true reach was, understand audiences. But we saw a shift in 15 and 16, so 2015, in two key areas. One was our user behavior. We moved from more desktop, cookie-based solutions to more devices. And the other one was we saw walled gardens really taking the responsibility to put a fence, a wall, around that data. And we saw deserting of these cookies. The reason why I call that out is we've been privileged to do that, which means our teams, and we've got plus 10,000 across APAC, have an amazing understanding of this area. So what we're spending a lot of time right now is how do we actually look at the playbook of the future, because we are 18 months out, this is not done yet, and really enhance that team to become the consultants of our clients. So again, that history has kind of served us well, and now what we've got to do is enhance moving forward. Then the last point, what we're doing and what we're passionate about doing is being an active participant in the solution. I think it's crucial for all groups to take this seriously. And we're spending a lot of time in the world of regulatory, a lot of time with the world of the technology vendors, operating systems, really understanding what Chrome and Apple are doing in this area, and really trying to just kind of navigate that through, and really working with the publishers. And if we go to the next slide, this kind of gives you a bit of a tangible kind of conversation, what we're having with publishers. From an Omnicom Media Group point of view, we're very heavy in investment focus. We believe in a partnership approach with our publishers, and we're really talking to our publishers right now about authentication. How do we actually empower publishers to get that one-to-one relationship? Because I want to call out at this point that publishers over the last period of time have enjoyed incremental revenues from this world of programmatic. They've seen their average yields go from $1 to maybe $2. As behavioral targeting disappears, that pressure comes on. That puts pressures on content. So if we just take a step back as consumers of the internet isn't free. It is actually underpinned by advertising. So we really want to make sure that this group, the publishers, are really increasing the value exchange that they're having, like advertisers have to, with us as the end user, and respecting that privacy. And that's why I'm kind of really proud to be on this talk today, because I do see Mediacorp taking that leadership position. I've loved the way that they've had the conversation with the clients, with their end users, and how they're building towards. So I'm going to pass back to the Mediacorp team, because I think they're going to demonstrate that in a couple of case studies.
Thank you, Paul. We're seeing a lot of questions come in. Thank you for that. I think, guys, please keep the questions coming in. Really, really good questions. I just want to address two of these questions before we jump into the Mediacorp case study. The first one is, who will suffer the most in the cookieless world? Amazing question. Obviously, there are a lot of people who are reliant on the cookie for their business chain, right? And marketers, advertisers are reliant on it for, effectively reaching their customers. Publishers like us are reliant on third-party cookies as well. So there's a reliance on every single person. And I think the people who will struggle the most is the organizations and people who don't do anything. So the worst thing you can do is just let the change happen without knowing what you should be doing, without having sufficient knowledge around the topic, and just letting it pass you, because you will end up you may end up in a phase where maybe you're not even using digital marketing actively right now. It's not one of your plans. Maybe you're using it extensively right now. You don't want to reach a point where there's a sudden switch off and you're not prepared for it. So my answer to that question is, who will be hardest impacted are those who don't embrace any change. Another question that we want to talk about is around privacy. So we talked a little bit about how the user privacy debate has gone on. And if those of you familiar with the Singapore market, the PDPA was set up, right? So the Personal Data Protection Act. Does that affect cookies? Not so much. It does affect single sign-on data. It affects declared information in your interaction with your customers. So the case study is going to cover a little bit about where Mediacorp is collecting data from our users as well. And we have to be very clear that we're not sharing identifiable information or personal data. If you're collecting first-party data, declared information, and you're able to anonymize it for the usage of digital marketing without having the ability to trace back to the individual attributes and personal details of that user, you're fine. Okay? GDPR is a much larger conversation, right? Paul, anything to add on that?
I think you covered it beautifully. The fact that we have to make change, that's what the focus has to be. Let's just take this time right now. And I keep mentioning to my teams, we're 18 months out. Let's not lose this opportunity. And I would say, if you're referring to GDPR, what I noticed that what we did in the industry, and this is what we've got to learn from, we left it to the last moment. Major organizations were coming to me 2 weeks out with big changes. And I do think we need to get ahead of it. So all the people on today's call, today's day one of 18 months out. Really take this opportunity to get in. And I love the question, because I think it's a great question. I would add, we will see more regulatory enhancements here. So the operating systems in some ways are starting to self-regulate. The regulatory, our governments will also bring in additional. So this is an evolving landscape. So even what we talk about today, the chances are the currency will change. So definitely, I think you've answered those two questions beautifully.
Thank you, Paul. Himanshu, a question for you. And this question was raised about, if third-party cookies are phased out, does that mean that Google Analytics will become redundant?
Actually, so most analytics tools, including Google Analytics, they definitely drop a first-party cookie. So when a JavaScript or a software is loaded on the publisher website or the consumer-facing website, the cookie is typically a first-party cookie. So the basic implementation should not be impacted, because first-party cookies are going to stay. However, if you have modules in your analytics tools which bring in third-party data or third-party segments, you may want to do an audit of your entire tool. I think what we are going to touch upon, and it's I think generally good practice for everyone to do, is one is to take an audit of all the different data collection systems that you're using, and just see what kind of cookies are you collecting. Is it first party, third party? And then work with your either agency who's done the implementation or your internal team of engineers, and then see what exactly, how exactly has been engineered, and then what can be done to, either adapt or mitigate the impact because of third party cookies being phased out. But the basic implementation of Google Analytics, it should not be impacted.
Thank you. I think, guys, it's not all doom and gloom, right? So I want to make that clear, right? It's not press the panic button, throw your toys out of pram. That's not it. What we're saying is that a change is coming, and the major players in the business are taking steps as well. So we talked about Chrome being the largest impact once they remove cookies. Google is doing a lot, and they too are trying to explore what are the best ways for them to be able to continue providing the services that they are providing today, even when cookies are phased out. Another question that was raised was, are DMPs going to become obsolete? No, they're not, because the DMPs are changing their business model as well. The focus is shifting towards first-party data. It's removing that third-party collection. So remember, first-party data is any data that you, the business owner, or the content owner, the media owner, collects, right? It's not the removal of audience targeting completely. It's just a change in methodology of how the data is collected. And it's a change of methodology of how you can target. And what is primarily changing is data flow across multiple different platforms, right? So that's what's changing, okay? Let's maybe some of your questions can be addressed by us looking at what steps Mediacorp has taken to address this as well. So Mediacorp started its data journey quite a few years ago, where we partnered with a well-known DMP, Lotame, as our first-party data platform, right? So we started collecting our first-party cookies, segmenting them. We needed to have an understanding of who these people were so that we could target better for our ads. We could provide analytics from Adobe Analytics and Google Analytics into content consumption behaviors and all that. And that was primarily what the consumer insights and analytics team was doing in the digital space. But we also noticed that there was this shift. There was a shift coming much before this, and we launched this platform called the MeID Audience Analytics Hub about 2 years ago, just over 2 years. And the purpose of this platform is to sort of, one, unify disparate data sources. We're still relying on the likes of analytics platforms like Adobe and Google. We're still relying on DMPs, right? But we also need to ingest our first-party data and ensure that we have a good picture of our audience. So let me give you an understanding of what this platform really does as a learning point for what the future could look like and what would happen if you were to partner with like-minded publishers. So to establish what MeID as a platform does, we kind of need to think about the user's behavior. So as you know, Mediacorp has got multiple platforms: CNA, MeWatch, MeListen, 8 Days, 8 World, and the list goes on. And we've onboarded quite a few partners as well. And each of these platforms will have their own data strategy if we didn't combine it together. Now, take for example, on any given day, a user, a PMEB user like myself or you, when they come in the morning on maybe their mobile app or on their desktop, they come to CNA for their news fix, right? Okay, what happened while I was asleep? What new developments on COVID-19? So they get their fix of their news. Right after that, maybe during lunch, after a couple of meetings, you're probably going to be on MeWatch catching up on your favorite 8 p.m. drama, right? Because you missed it on free to air. In the afternoon, you want to relax a little bit. So while you're answering emails and all that, you've probably got MeListen playing and you're listening to, your favorite radio station, right? Gene Denker speaking to you towards the end of the day. Later on in the evening, you might have, you might interact with an ad, or you might have heard something on MeListen about, a promo that's going on and ended up on an e-commerce page, right? So that's a typical journey. Right? Of course, there's a lot more interactions that go on, but there are multiple data points across all of this. So if we just look at your web analytics tool, this gives us data around location, access method, platform, what kind of operating system, where did you come from, which domain were you looking at before you landed on CNA or MeWatch or MeListen? What is your interaction? Are you bookmarking sites? Are you following certain topics? Did you share anything on social media? Then we are serving ads at the same time. So the interaction with your ads, were you exposed to a soft drink ad or a holiday ad or a car ad? Are you clicking on these ads? That's another pool of data. We have a recommendation engine that relies on your consumption behavior to push out content recommendations. And that's really important because you don't want to see unrelated content in your content journey. Then we have our data management platform that's collecting and bucketing all of these cookies for the purpose of audience targeting. We have single sign-on data, so user login data. Some of you who are app users would have already experienced that you can log in and customize your preference. So all of this is information that we're collecting and feeding into actionable insights. But the collection is across all of the place. Not to mention affiliate partners. So affiliate partners, content partners, people within the Mediacorp partner network. We've got so many different data points. And if we didn't unify all of this, then we're still relying on a very disparate view of our consumer. So the MeID platform was designed specifically to address this problem, right? And from two fronts. Number one, we needed to have a better picture of our own content consumers so that we can feed them more relevant content and more relevant ads. Number two, the advertisers that work with us, they needed greater targetability. They needed more accuracy in targeting, right? And what if they didn't want to pay for a third-party solution? So we needed to come up with a solution for that. And that's kind of what MeID is. Himanshu is now going to talk a little bit about what MeID really does for us.
Yeah, so MeID is our universal ID solution that was built to enable this matching of disparate data sources that Sandeep spoke about. So when a user visits our network site, any of our network sites, in this case, let's say it's Channel News Asia, all the different IDs that are dropped by different tools. So be it our analytics tool, the advertising server, the data management platform, or the single sign-on tool. All of these IDs are passed to the service that we've built, which then creates a single ID to stitch all of them together. And with this universal ID as the primary identifier, we can then unify user actions on our network, be it on content or ads, and then further augment it with third-party data from our data management platform, as well as user details that are declared by our users on the single sign-on tool. If you go to the next slide, Sandeep. And then using the single source MeID as the key identifier, all the user signals that come in typically via multiple transactions or hits that the users do on our network, all of them are processed to create a single unified view of the user. What this requires is translating this transaction level data into a unified set of labels or properties for every user. This requires a robust data pipeline as well as data science models to convert granular data points into user level properties. And these user level properties are typically either demographics, which may be age, gender, or ethnicity. They may be behaviors, which could be, when was the last time the user visited, or what's the frequency of visiting a network or a particular site. It could be user interests. So is the user interested in finance-related content, technology, education, and so on. We also have a device graph, which identifies persons across multiple devices. And then there are third-party signals which we collect from our data partners or our DMP, which would be typically an interest that we ourselves don't collect. So it may be travel-related, dining, shopping, and so on and so forth. So this is what this is the unified view of a user that our service has built on top of the data that we collect. And Sandeep, if you go to the next slide. One thing that we always hear in the industry, and what we've also seen ourselves, is first-party data has accuracy, much more accuracy over third-party sources. And what we're showing here is the accuracy results that we have seen using our first-party demographic data with third-party data sources. So we ran in-target accuracy tests, and what this test does is it involves comparing accuracy percentages within defined age groups or gender segments. created using first our own first-party data, and then using a third-party data source. And then these the segments that we create using these two sources, and then compared with an independent industry data provider. In this case, it was Nielsen Digital Audience Ratings. And what we see is, compared to third-party data, if we, let's say, index third-party data at 100, the first-party inferred data, which is first-party data, but where the user has not declared any demographic information, but we've inferred using lookalike modeling. First-party inferred data is up to 90% more accurate than third-party data, while first-party declared data, where the user has actually, at the time of sign-up, revealed their age and gender, can be as much as 5 times more accurate than third-party data. And likewise with gender, first-party inferred data is about 50% more accurate, and first-party declared data can be as much as 2.5 times more accurate than a third-party data source. What this goes to show is, first-party data is more accurate and therefore can be much more effective when it comes to, audience-based targeting as well. If you go to the next slide, Sandeep. Finally, I think just in summary, these are the benefits that we have seen after when we use MeID within the organization. So one, it gives us a single source view of all of our users. We get highly granular behavior signals, which we can then use to create bespoke audience segments, both for our own marketing as well as for advertising for our clients. We can serve more accurate content recommendations to our end users who visit our site, and that helps in better engagement. Outbound ad tech and even martech integration enables easy data portability. As I spoke about in the previous slide, higher accuracy leads to more precise and effective ad targeting. And finally, it cuts down our costs by reducing our dependency on third-party data management platforms. Yeah. So I'll hand it over to Sandeep now. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Himanshu. I mean, this example, I mean, it's not something that we want you to implement. We went ahead and built a platform because we had a very specific need for a platform. There are options to license other providers who are doing this as well. But what's important and the leave behind from all of this is that there are various options available to you, right? And one of those options is working with, a second party or a partner, like MeID. I mean, I'm not pushing. The idea of this is not really to sell you MeID, but it's to tell you that a lot of publishers like ourselves have gone ahead and taken this step to grow their first-party offering as well, because they understand the challenge. There are a lot of businesses, the agencies, like what Paul talked about earlier, they are already working, on building their own data capabilities and accessing the right partners for the right first-party data for usage of advertising campaigns. And this is across the spectrum. It is not only for large advertisers. A large advertiser in the FMCG space or the banking space might want to go and build his own platform because there is portability and a reason for that. For a smaller SME or a B2B company, you might want to leverage on these technologies that are being worked on by other companies. And we will have some reference points from thought leaders in this space at the end of the slides that you can reference. Okay, but remember the point that we made. Everyone needs an identity solution, whether that identity solution is built by yourselves, like what we did, whether it is leveraging on an agency that is far ahead in this space, like what OMG is doing, or it's enhancing what you're doing right now, okay? And let me try and visualize this in this little diagram that I'm going to play right now. Let's assume you're a retail business or a B2B business that manages most of your clients through your website. Okay, so your customer visits your retail store, maybe he joins a loyalty program. Okay, he shares his information with you. Okay, age, gender, what do I like, what I don't like. And for majority of you, as we saw from the poll earlier, this data is stored in your CRM. So that's already the first step. That's amazing. Good job on that. If you haven't already done the step of building your CRM, then you need to, right? There's a lot of government initiatives for SMEs. If you look up what IMDA is doing, if you look up what Enterprise Singapore is doing, they're offering a lot of easy entry options for you to build up your CRM capabilities. let's say you are not so focused on retail, you're focused on e-commerce, or you have both, right? And then all of that data for a lot of customers is actually limited to your analytics platform. And I think Google Analytics is one of the most used platforms, right? Very, very much later in that stage, do you actually think about, hey, I've got both retail and I've got e-commerce. Is the e-commerce and my website analytics feeding into my CRM as well, right? So that's an additional step. One more step that you can add to this is ask yourself, is the analytics platform and the CRM speaking to each other? Is there an opportunity for these platforms to speak to each other? Can I merge that data to build a unified view, right? In some cases, advertisers have taken the next step and gone into building a DMP or working with a DMP provider, right? So one of the questions were, are DMPs going to go bust with third parties going out? No, they're changing their models, right? We work with Lotami because as a platform, it allowed us to merge some data insights to build and curate our own segments. And now we're still leveraging on Lotami to feed MeID as well and to grow our data offering across multiple touch points. So once you've done all of this, you can then, look at enriching that data from an additional layer, which is working with a partner, right? Whether that partner be an agency, another data provider, a publisher, like we talked about earlier. You evaluate these and see where they fit, which one fits with your business objectives and your value chain. And last but not least is the activation. So having all of that data is great because you'll have a lot of insights. You might even build out your digital, your data analytics team to start understanding this data better. But activating it is very important as well. So as I mentioned earlier, Google is doing a lot in this space to ensure that even with the removal of third-party cookies, you don't lose out on analytics, you don't lose out on their marketing insights, you don't lose out on the ability to activate the data that you may collect from a first-party perspective. And they're great partners of ours. We are allowing, Mediacorp is allowing our first-party data to be used for our campaigns on programmatic guarantee activities. If you've interfaced with Singapore Media Exchange, then you also know that we are allowing first-party data usage on these specific audiences that you can buy across Singapore's primary inventory providers. All right, so this is just a picture of what your data journey could be in the future. So there's a lot of information that we've covered today, and I think a lot of you may be left behind with this question. How do I prepare? What is your prescription for me, right? And I think Paul's going to try and give you some really good next steps.
Yeah, thank you. And let's just build out the first 30 days so it's up on the screen. The point that I would make here is there's a couple of different things before we get into this. You'll have to invest in infrastructure. That's kind of what we just covered. But I cannot stress how important is the value exchange you have with your customer and the end user. Because we're going to be encouraged as end users to make decisions on the fly. We will see from Apple, and again, rightly so, every 30 days remind us of our decision. This is going to be something as we as users a lot more will have to will be dealing with. My big takeout from here is focus on infrastructure, yes, which is what we've gone through, but creating that value proposition, regardless if you're a publisher, an advertiser, a technology vendor, with the end consumer, us as humans of the internet, is going to be the #1 focus. So with that in mind, the way I approach this kind of information was not so much from a large advertiser, which Omnicom Media Group works with day in, day out. That's kind of our core business. It's more from a SME point of view, because we noticed when we looked at the participants today, there was a lot of people across the region coming in from a small to medium enterprise. And I'm lucky enough to have an amazing wife who's built an amazing business, but it's a small business. And here are the things that she's doing right now as we go to that march towards 18 months. So we're 18 months out, this is what she's doing. What I'm noticing right now is if she's getting herself familiar. In the last week alone, including this session today, we have seen more press on this than ever before. So you may have just noticed today, Facebook announced that iOS 14 is going to affect publisher revenue. Everybody's starting to message this. I mentioned before, the playbook isn't written. We're going to be creating the playbook, but what we've got to do is learn from our mistakes and get it earlier. So what she is doing and what we're doing together is understanding what's happening. So the thing that I would encourage everybody on today's call is spend the next 30 days understanding. Then while you're understanding that, forming those ideas yourself, build out your own assessment and own audit. Do I have a good, robust approach having a one-to-one conversation with my clients? Do I understand my clients? If I don't understand my clients, what are some tactics to build that? Am I creating value to my clients? Why would a client give me authorization to do advanced targeting? They're all the things that I would be asking myself right now and kind of familiarizing myself into that space. We move into the next stage, let's say the next 60 days out. You then should, regardless if you're one person or 50 people, you have to appoint someone to run this. This has to be a priority, because if it's not a priority, we'll get to 18 months and 2 weeks out, like what happened with some of the other things, you go, oh, wow, what's happening? So make it a priority, create a task force and focus on first party. We are moving to a first party world. That's a good thing. It's a good thing for many small and medium enterprise businesses. It's a great thing for many large clients. Bring that first party mentality to the business. But again, go back to that point before. Why would my client give me the responsibility to be able to do this? And then evaluate the second party connection. So we talked about before, first party, what is second party? Who are the right partners that I can work with, taking my first party as a bit of a seed and work with those second parties. And they're going to be the likes of Google, they're going to be the likes of Facebook, they're going to be the likes of publishers like Mediacorp, and really just understanding that. They're going to be, how do I onboard, and maybe some biddable systems. But again, at this stage, it's just painting that roadmap, putting a plan together. Then if we go to 180 days out, so we're getting closer to 18 months away, it's now starting to invest. I talked about before, I think there's two things regardless if you're a publisher or an advertiser, what you should be thinking about right now, which is value proposition. Why would my client, my content consumer give me the authorization, the responsibility? That's important. But now that they've given you responsibility, how are you going to organize and collect that in your infrastructure? How are you going to respect that? How are you going to ensure that you've got the processes around that? This is where you really need to take in what's happened. We've listened all the way through, we've asked those questions, and now you're making decisions. In some ways, I know there's a question in the chat, but reliance on third-party data, we're kind of lucky across APAC. I spent a fair bit of time in the American market. The American market does have a very strong third-party heritage, mainly coming from the credit card industry from 20 years ago. Across APAC, we don't, but it's now taking the learnings we've got from third-party and probably reducing the reliance on that. So if you are transacting on third-party today, don't stop, keep doing that, but take the learnings from that. And I think that's an important period here, which is I may have first party that I'm using, but I may not have evolved it enough. I've got my second party partnerships that I've done, but maybe that's not at scale. I've got some third party. Create a stockpile of those insights, because those insights are going to benefit you once we get to the post-cookie kind of deprecation. So there's some things that I would be just kind of be thinking about from a small to medium enterprise and a large organization as well. But a lot of this comes down to taking actionable change and process now. If you leave this to 6 months out, it'll be doable, but you're gonna have a lot more pressure and a lot more pressure on your business. And we're gonna get away from what our core role as businesses is serving our clients.
Thank you so much, Paul. We're coming towards the end of the webinar. Thanks so much for those of you who have stayed on. Final thoughts from us is, really, be aware of the change that's coming, right? Be ready for the change, right? See, the steps that Paul mentioned, a lot of them are applicable to all businesses. We had one question here, what if you don't have the capabilities to build out a first-party solution? What if you're a government agency that doesn't control the MPs? There are already solutions available, whether that be with your publisher, with your appointed agencies, or with other tech providers. And, there are multiple SMEs that are still able to have the entire advertising value chain taken care with Google Marketing Platform. And if that's working for you, then great, stick to that. But find out also what changes are coming. So be informed is the most important thing that we want as a leave behind. don't just wait for the industry to change. Be aware and be ready for those changes and take the right actions. And the right action is different. Your business needs, whether you're a B2B, whether you're a government client, whether you're a new SME that hasn't even started digital marketing. Evaluate what's important to you and take those steps, right? We've got a ton of questions to go through. That's amazing. Before we go through these questions and make our closing statements, I want to let you know that we will be sending out these slides once they're, a few days after the session. You will receive it if you've registered with your emails. And a lot of reading here will help you with the topics that we covered today. A lot of examples, a lot of the how-tos and what are these, what are those. One of the questions we received was, what is the difference between a pixel and a cookie, right? And there, to a lot of people, it's the same thing because they collect data, right? But there are quite a few intricacies and the use cases are really different. I won't cover that today because we're going to be holding up everyone. But that's a lot of information that you can speak to any one of these guys or go to any one of these links here and read more about. If you think about the steps that you want to take and who are your thought leaders that you need to reach out to, here are some resources that you can go to. You have the IB Tech Lab, right? They are anonymous. They are a coalition of multiple different publishers, tech providers, companies that come together and help you solve and address these issues. You can approach your agencies like OMG. You can approach people like us at Mediacorp to understand how we can use our first-party data to better your needs. And reach out to partners that we work with. Lotame, for example. Someone asked what exactly is that? Lotame, Lotame. That's a partner of ours that runs data management platforms and builds specific solutions for your data needs. Adobe is building up their resources. Google's building up their resources. Facebook is building up its resources in that first party space. So there's a ton of different companies that you can work with, and no one solution is going to be the same for everybody. Last thoughts, guys?
I think the question that someone asked, Pixel and cookie, I think Pixel is the piece of code that actually collects user information, and then one of the actions it does is actually drop a cookie on the browser. So the cookie sits on the browser. Pixel is the code that actually activates the cookie. But yeah, I think overall, I think the questions were pretty good. I think the good thing is people are asking the right questions. Some of it may feel basic, but I think it's good to be informed rather than not tackle your lack of understanding or your need to know more about the industry, how it operates, how these technical things work, and because those are going to be key and critical for you to take the right actions to then adapt to a situation where these things change the way they work and how the industry is going to change as well. Yeah, that's it from my end.
Awesome. From my point of view, I've kind of covered it. Focus on the value exchange. That has to be the number one. Education, the playbook isn't written. It's time to kind of just stay connected to that. Partnership, I think, partner where you need to and ask those questions. There is no dumb question in this. This is very technical. We've heard all the logos and logos all through this presentation. It's not an easy thing. So don't be frightened to ask and ask partners for more information, but focus on that value exchange. And the last one is education. I mentioned there's a lot of resourcing out there right now. We're seeing some on the screen now. IAB Tech Lab is doing a lot of work in this space. You've got Trade Desk and the industry coming together, which I think is super interesting with the Identify 2.0. Facebook is doing some messaging. Just really soak this in at the moment. And don't be frightened. The sky's not falling. We will work something out and it's going to be better. As I mentioned before, the cookie was great. It's not the infrastructure of the future.
Thank you, guys. We've come to the end of our webinar. We don't want to keep you behind any longer. There are a lot of questions that we didn't get through today, but don't worry. When we publish the slides, we will include a lot of the questions and the answers. If you have additional questions with the registration and the confirmation email, you would have received email addresses where you can send through more information. Send through more of your questions. And once we publish these slides, we will be posting up a recording as well on the Mediacorp Executive Insights URL. So just search for that. You'll find it, no problem. You'll get a copy of these slides. And if you have more questions, you will know where to find us. Thank you so much for your attendance. We've had a great time preparing for this, and I think it's going to be a really interesting space in the next 18 months as the cookie is slowly moved out. Thank you very much for your attendance. Thank you, panelists. We will see you soon.